Hello everyone, this is John Kogan. I'm the CEO of Proformative, the online community for corporate finance, accounting, treasury, and related professionals. I would like to welcome everyone to today's webinar entitled Owning Finance Technology to Unlock Productivity and Drive Growth, How Finance Leaders Get It Done. We've got a great program today. It consists primarily of three components. First, a review of a recent survey conducted by CFO Research on some of the major challenges facing CFOs and other finance leaders with regards to their financial systems. What's working, what's not, what needs improving, etc. Second, I will be interviewing the CFO of Workday, who has an incredible background on how he thinks about and manages technology in his many roles. Finally, we will have an opportunity for Q&A directly with you, our attendees. And in that Q&A, you can ask either of today's speakers any questions you may have around the topics of finance, accounting, technology, and how they or others are using that technology to move their companies forward. So we've got a great program, a lot of content for you today. I'm very excited about it. And we've got a few items to discuss before we get into the main program. Number one, a quick welcome to Proformative. For those of you who are new to Proformative, we're the largest and fastest growing online community and resource for corporate finance, treasury, accounting, and related professionals. We welcome you. Just like we do online, we're going to keep today free and noise-free, which is to say great information brought to you by peers. So thanks so much for joining us today. We have a few notes about today's event. Number one, a link to today's presentation and a link to a video recording of this webinar will be sent out to all attendees within 24 hours of the event. The presentation is already posted at www.proformative.com/resources, so available for a free download. So if you'd like to grab that, follow along, make notes, share it out, etc., please feel free to do so, and you'll find it at that URL. Next, for those who will be receiving CPE credits today, we do need you to answer the three polling questions that will be launched. They are very quick. They're actually statistical in nature. So even if you're not here for CPE credit, we'd love you to chime in. They're very straightforward questions around technology and how your company deals with finance and related technology. We'll take about a 60-second pause for each of those three throughout today's webinar. And if you have any questions at all on CPE credits, how that works, hopefully you pre-registered for them, please contact Chris Brower. You can see her contact information right there on the page. Next, we encourage you to ask questions during today's event. I will be having a Q&A with Mark during the event, but that's going to be questions that I've pulled together prior to this event. What we'd also love to encourage you to do is ask your questions about technology, about Mark's background and his experience in implementing technology, any questions you might have for Laurie, our other speaker who I'll be introducing shortly. Please feel free to ask questions as we go. You'll note in your GoToWebinar control panel, there's a section there called questions. You might have to expand it. It's very simple. Just type your question in. No one sees the question except for myself. We hope to have time to get to all questions today, and any questions we don't get to, we'll work with the sponsors and speakers in today's webinar to make sure that we get you your answers. We really want to get those questions answered for you today. Finally, you will be asked to take a short survey at the end of the event, so we will close down the event. Then there's a brief survey. It's literally 60 seconds. We love to get your feedback. It helps us do better the next time, so we greatly appreciate that. Also, in that survey, if you would like for us to help you contact either of today's speakers or make contact with Workday, you can make that request with a simple click of the mouse in the survey. So we appreciate your staying and giving us that one extra minute after the event. We have a number of learning objectives today. Obviously, we're talking about how organizations meet, finance organizations meet the technology challenge. We live and die with our technology every day. I'd say that's more true with folks in finance and accounting and treasury than in any other corporate function. And we have a number of objectives today that we'd love to help folks reach, which is certainly understanding the challenges organizations are experiencing, to help you articulate those challenges for yourself, discover new strategies and best practices for upgrading and replacing systems from folks who do a lot of this for a living. Not just the company Workday, but actually the CFO of Workday, who has, as I mentioned before, a fantastic background and has done this for some very large, well-known companies in past lives. And also learn about views on strengths and weaknesses of finance systems and how we can address those strengths and weaknesses. So we've got a lot to cover today. And without further ado, I'd like to go ahead and introduce the first person who will be helping us down this path, and that is Laurie Wood. Laurie is Product Marketing Director for Workday and has more than 20 years of product marketing experience. Her previous experience includes product marketing at diverse companies, including Intact Corporation, Intuit, Palm Computing, and Siemens Communications. So Laurie, thanks so much for joining us today. We welcome you to the program. And I can see you've got control of the slides here. That's great. I will let you take it away.
Well, thank you, John, and welcome, everyone. It's my pleasure to spend a few moments with you providing some of the highlights of the research that CFO and Workday engaged in. And in doing so, we really hope that you'll be able to take some of these insights and learnings and potentially apply them to your own situation at your businesses. So just as a high-level context, this past fall, CFO Research and Workday conducted a study with over 200 senior finance executives at companies that were located in North America, but many of these companies actually were multinational in nature and had operations outside of North America as well. And we really wanted to explore their views about the strengths and the weaknesses of their financial management systems. And the reason that we wanted to do this, and the reason that we wanted to do it now, was because the average age of traditional financial management systems is actually approaching, anywhere between 10 years to 15 years. And as a result, these systems have, now reached a level of maturity where many organizations will be facing or are facing very important technology decisions. And so we wanted to understand how CFOs are approaching this and what impact this will have on their organization. So before I actually get into the detailed findings of the survey itself, I thought it might be interesting just to take a quick snapshot of the systems landscape within the respondent profile. And many of you may actually have a similar systems landscape as well. Hopefully you can see the slide, and what we see here is about 1/3 of the executives that we spoke to are actually running multiple ERP systems from different ERP vendors. And so that will actually, I think, provide some insight into some of the findings that we'll see here in a second. Another 1/3 of those executives are actually having, they run a single core ERP system, and they're using a best-of-breed approach to run application modules and operational modules from best-of-breed providers. And I imagine that many of you actually have similar systems landscapes. We also wanted to find out what other application tools or supplemental tools these executives were using, and it's not surprising here. And this is just to give you a kind of an idea. We've got the vast majority of businesses using external business intelligence and data warehousing tools. Clearly, there's external tools for financial and management reporting, business planning. So there's quite a wide array of other systems that need to be seamlessly, that's the desire, integrated with the core administrative ERP and financial management system. So that's just kind of a high-level view of the systems landscape. Now let's get down into some of the specific details of the study. So one of the most telling findings in the survey is that the executives clearly mentioned that it was really important to their role and their ability to deliver against the objectives of their business to stay current and to have their systems up to date. But that said, many of them were very, very slow to actually adapt to those changes. As you can see here, 46% of the respondents said that it took too long to adapt their systems to changes in business priorities or business processes, compared with only 5% who say that their systems were really highly adaptive. And then the remaining, the 48%, fall in the middle, and they indicated that their systems are kind of moderately adaptive with definite room for improvement. In some of the interviews, we tried to tease out, what were some of the driving factors behind this. One controller, for example, mentioned that the older system, and I mentioned that the average age is now 10 to 15 years, he said that these older systems were actually not easily or quickly changed. Similarly, another finance executive at a company, one who had the multiple instances of ERPs across his organization, said that because of that fragmentation, it was really difficult to implement process change, and that if a process change occurred or any change actually occurred, it was really, really challenging to kind of move that change throughout the multiple ERP systems. Very, very lengthy process. So what we see here is that while these executives may vary in the extent to which they struggle to keep pace with change, they all were unanimous that their systems actually had to keep better pace with change, and this was something that they were very focused on from a systems standpoint. So we wanted to then, once again, drill down and find out, so what is getting in the way? Why are they not really able to adapt to change as quickly as they need? The primary shortcoming, according to the survey, is the lack of systems flexibility, which I touched on a little bit beforehand. 44% of the folks we talked to said that their systems are inflexible and difficult to change, and that this is the predominant reason and the predominant systems issue that interferes with finance's ability to actually do their job. Systems fragmentation was the second most often cited problem, and not surprisingly, when we take a look at their systems landscape, 1/3 of them had either multiple ERP systems, or they were trying to really deal with this fragmented landscape. More than 1/3 of the executives said that they're really concerned by the extent to which their systems are made up of those disparate components, and that these disparate components actually lacked strong interfaces between them. One of these concerns were a major reason why one of the firms that we spoke with decided to actually undergo a consolidation. So they had multiple regional instances of ERP throughout their multinational organization, and they actually consolidated. It was a very lengthy process, but it actually resulted in some very important benefits to the company. The CFO that we spoke to said that the standardization of transactions absolutely increased the overall operational efficiency of his finance organization. Clearly, keeping the systems updated became much easier, and of course, system maintenance had become less resource intensive. So all in all, it was just a more cost-effective way for him to run the business. You can also see here that 34% of the respondents indicated that the high cost of upgrading was another major challenge. And so it should come as little surprise then that for the most part, many companies try to avoid upgrading their systems. Before I get into that level of detail, I think we're going to take a quick pause here for a polling question.
We sure are. So this is the first of 3 polls which we'll be launching. Once again, if you're here for CPE credits, you must take the polls. But even if you're not, we'd love for you to weigh in. 10-second question and answer. We'll leave this out for about 30 seconds. I will remind folks they can ask questions at any time via the question area of your GoToWebinar control panel. And Laurie, thanks so much for adding the snippets from the folks you spoke to. Too frequently we just see the numbers and we don't get the input from the people actually, the practitioners that you're surveying. So that's nice to have. I'll leave this open for another 5 seconds and then we'll close it down and pick up where we left off. All right, I'll close this and back to you, Laurie.
All right. So the research showed that a large share of, I think I'm on the wrong slide here. There we go. Generally wait at least 5 or more years between upgrades. And of these, at least half of them wait 10 years or more. Wow. I mean, that's quite a long time. That I think that gains some insights into why these executives are saying they're having difficulty keeping up with change. But the bottom line is that systems upgrade are very, very costly. For the most part, these executives said that they were very disruptive to their business. Some of the executives indicated that their finance staff and IT teams often spent 6 months or more planning and prepping for systems upgrades. Another interesting insight that came out of this conversation or the interviews was that several of the executives cited that the value of actually minimizing customizations as a way to keep their systems as close to vendor standard as possible. And the reason why they did this is that in a fragmented systems environment, the buildup of customization actually made it very difficult and expensive to keep the systems up to date. One VP in particular noted that when it actually came time to try to upgrade, they simply couldn't just plug and play. They actually had to go back and change the source code in the upgrade, which made it prohibitively expensive. Okay. So in the research, the senior executives seemed especially interested, this is really interesting, in the performance of their systems, even more so than they were interested in the cost and the adaptability. So what actually does that performance mean? Well, it means, according to them, providing their users with more useful and timely information, having the ability to support a swift financial close, and other tools that enabled finance to be more effective, with the explicit goal, as they indicated, of kind of freeing their finance staff from non-value activities and towards activities that have a more substantial impact on the business. That was a key theme we heard over and over was that the finance really wants to be much more strategic. They were in unanimous agreement, actually, in their desire to direct more of their resources towards these higher value activities. But they say, as you can see here, that their staffs are frankly kind of bogged down by some manual tasks. A whopping 86% of them said that ideally their finance teams should be spending the majority of their time on strategic analysis, planning, and decision support. But 4 out of 5 indicate that their teams are actually burdened by too many low-level tasks. And when we asked what are these low-level tasks, they indicated that they were administrative tasks, reconciling accounts, running Excel reports, trying to generate reports for the business unit managers. So we think, that one of perhaps a major discrepancy or contributor to this discrepancy between the real, what they're currently doing, and the desired state may well indeed be related to systems that perform less than adequately. One executive, for example, we spoke to had made some recent changes, had upgraded his systems, and one of the primary drivers of that upgrade was so that he could enable managers in the business units to actually get more relevant financial management reports so that his team would not be responsible for doing all that. And he said that he was able to actually free up headcount that would otherwise be spending running Excel and generating these reports to focus more on strategic analysis. And he indicated that his ultimate goal is to get to the point where finance is actually involved in every single critical decision that the company is making. So we also wanted to then, find out from these executives, what are the triggers for change? We understand that there are a lot of problems, they're kind of slow to upgrade, but what would actually, incent a CFO to actually look at replacing his or her system? And so a couple of key things came out of that question, and actually the frequency to which we heard these is actually listed in highest frequency from left to right. So obviously we're talking to a finance audience, so I'm sure you all can appreciate this. A focus on an overall reduction of cost or increasing efficiency, kind of driving a higher level of finance operational performance was a key driver. The second one, the business process change, interestingly enough, is very much related and correlated to that first one. What we heard was that imagine if your systems had difficulty responding to the rapid pace of internal change and optimizing your business process. What that meant was that your teams were actually involved in doing manual workarounds or manual processes, which in turn, of course, drives up the cost of finance, delivery, and negatively impacts productivity. So those two are very much correlated. The third one, technology advancements, the just hyper change in technology today, and the fact that CFOs are very much interested in providing enablement tools for their teams, mobility, collaboration. That was another key driver of systems upgrades. Some of the other ones, naturally, probably not surprising, perhaps some of you all on the phone can relate to these, are other internal changes in C-suite or leadership, where somebody comes in maybe with a different perspective or a different idea. They did mention changing regulatory requirements, as well as, growth. So their business is changing, they've reached the capacity of their system. I was, interested in this very last one, this vendor imposed. And what this meant is that their vendor either was ending life or ending support, or required a total re-implementation for an upgrade. So these are some of the key catalysts for change. Now, when approaching change, all of the CFOs that we talked to and the senior finance executives absolutely said that they prefer to take a long-term view. They don't like to be reactive in terms of their approach to managing changes. They do see value in taking a longer-term view because obviously, a shorter-term view, little costs, add up over time. And although the longer-term view does resonate with the most with these executives, two additional mindsets, I think, are required still a little bit of focus. So close to 1/3 of them, talked about value in an opportunistic approach to replacing their systems. So what that means is like the shifting circumstances in their business, which we saw in the previous slide, kind of changing business conditions, changes in leadership. That was definitely a valid reason. And then a similar proportion of respondents agree that within the realm of financial management, maturity actually gives rise to change. Even when a system serves the company well, in the past, kind of company maturation, company growth often demand a more capable system to meet changing needs. So kind of taken together, I think that what the big takeaway here is that these results show that the CFOs that we talked to agreed that the best approach for considering a systems replacement or change is really to measure the value that system will have far into the future. towards that end, I just thought this next slide was quite interesting. One of the largest financial services firms that we talked to in the study took that very same approach. This particular company was experiencing rapid growth, and according to the VP, the firm sought to, quote unquote, future-proof its financial system. They wanted to really take a long-term view, and they asked themselves the question, what technology was going to be around in 2020, and also what technology was going to be in transition in 2012 and 2015, and they actually wanted to avoid those transition spots. And so what they ultimately chose to do was to replace their traditional on-prem ERP system with a cloud-based system. And this cloud-based financial management systems are actually on the radar screens. We see a lot of CFOs and other decision makers. Now, what's interesting is that even though cloud financial management is definitely on the radar screen, we hear a lot about it, there's much discussion, in our survey we revealed an even split between those CFOs who favor cloud versus those who do not. And what's interesting about this is that this divisiveness is actually aligned with the overall maturity cycle of the financial cloud segment. Let me show you kind of what we mean here. So this is a chart, some research from Saugatuck Technology. And what it shows is that the cloud adoption rate for financial management, what we see is actually an upward trajectory. So today, or when the study was done, the cloud adoption rate was only 25%. That was actually very well aligned with the percentage of CFOs who actually said that they would consider cloud at that time for their business. So there's a high corollary here. Some cloud segments are very mature. For example, software as a service for CRM applications, payroll, human resources, those have reached mainstream, while cloud-based financial management systems are starting that trajectory. And according to Saugatuck, by 2015, in a couple of years, the cloud adoption rate will exceed 40% of all enterprises. That's a pretty interesting stat, and a lot of the other stats that we see in market research are very much in line with that. So we also asked these CFOs what benefits they see in cloud technology, and the research suggests that they're most interested in the cloud's ability to deliver greater flexibility. Now that makes sense, obviously, given that they consider a lack of flexibility to be the primary drawback of the systems that they currently own. We see here that cost savings is a primary driver, as is improved productivity and greater efficiency. So the net of this is that in the minds of the executives that we surveyed, the cloud technology may indeed offer a means of alleviating their biggest systems-related pain point, and that was lack of systems flexibility. So that concludes my review of the survey, and I think the conclusion is that the burning platform for CFOs as it pertains to the systems-related issues is keeping pace with the rapid pace of business change. It's a real challenge for these finance executives, and it just doesn't appear to be getting any better. That said, there are alternatives becoming available, and as we've seen, many of the executives are beginning to plan for change on the horizon. So with that, I'm going to turn the controls back over to John.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that, Laurie. So once again, very quick question. We'd appreciate everyone chiming in, whether you're here for CPE credit or not. I'll also remind folks that they can ask questions at any time. And as soon as we're done here, we'll get into our one-on-one interview. Another quick reminder that you will have a survey at the end of the event, and we appreciate your staying for that last minute to fill out that survey. That really, that feedback helps us tremendously, so we appreciate that. I'll go ahead and leave this out for another 5 seconds. And, okay, so let's close that down and get into the next segment of the webinar. So it's my great pleasure to introduce Mark Peek, who is the Chief Financial Officer at Workday. Mark brings extensive industry experience to his role overseeing all aspects of Workday's financial operations. Prior to joining Workday in June of 2012, Mark served as CFO and co-president at VMware, a global leader in virtualization and cloud infrastructure. During his 5 years at VMware, Mark helped to build the company's finance and business operations infrastructure to scale to support the nearly $5 billion enterprise software company. From 2000 to 2007, Mark was a Senior Vice President and Chief Accounting Officer at Amazon.com. Mark also spent 10 years as an audit partner at Deloitte, where he focused on technology companies and multinational project and engagement management. Mark has served on the board of directors at Trimble Navigation since 2010. Mark, thanks so much for joining us today. It's a great pleasure to have you with us.
Thanks, John. Great to be here.
So why don't we get started and ask simply, how did you get to Workday in the position you're in right now?
Well, it's almost full circle for me. I spent 19 years in public accounting. My undergraduate degree was in accounting. I sat for the CPA exam. I went to work at the time for what was one of the big 8. We quickly consolidated down to become the big 4, and I was an audit partner with Deloitte. And I spent most of the 90s at Microsoft, and this was pre-Sarbanes-Oxley, and so the role of an audit partner during that era was very different from what it is today. And one of the interesting projects I worked on at Microsoft was their SAP implementation, and they were moving off of AS400s, off of sort of the mainframe device to client server, and as Steve Ballmer would probably say, to eat their own dog food, and it was the first implementation of SAP in a client server environment running Windows NT. And so it was I was struck by the project of how much energy and resource went into these big systems implementations when the initial goal was simplicity, and we were moving from the era of mainframe to client server, and that era has really dominated computing for the past 20 years. Really sort of all moving towards this year 2000 crisis that I think many of our participants today probably remember was the big burning platform for a lot of change. And so many organizations during the 90s, including Microsoft, which is the primary platform for client server technology, we're trying to solve a different problem. I left public accounting. Some would say I was saved from public accounting in 2000 by moving to Amazon.com and spent 7 years there really learning more about the private sector, but with a public company. Was the chief accounting officer there, and had my first sort of real life sort of living with these systems. Amazon built many of its systems internally, used packaged software for both HR and for financials, but created a lot of systems given the complexity of their network and their enterprise. And I ran the IT organization with respect to the financials and HR while I was at Amazon. And I had the great opportunity in 2007 to go to work for VMware. And in many ways, VMware is one of the, I think, as we look back, is one of the great system software companies in the world. What they have is a technology, or pioneered a technology, virtualization, which in many ways took us back from the client server and the cost of client server and the inefficiency of client server technology to virtualization, where you could pool all of these x86 servers together and begin to think of your overall data center as some place where you had a pool of resources and you weren't tying applications to specific boxes. And virtualization has largely been one of the cornerstones for cloud computing. So my time at VMware was also interesting because I ran the IT organization, and you began to see some of the big challenges, particularly when you're trying to grow globally at scale, of having legacy applications that were initially installed with a set of design facts, but at the same time you're growing and the business has extraordinary demands on being able to change and being able to be flexible. And there's nothing, probably many of our participants have experienced this, there's nothing that's harder to do than to have business leaders come to you suggesting that they want to make a change in some product offering, or the change in some billing structure, or the change in some way that you're going to interact with your customers, and have the finance and the IT organization come back and say, yeah, we can do that, but it'll take 18 months. It just slows the pace of change, and it's one of the ways that you get the nimble startup competitors that can come in and move very quickly, and and many times cause real competitive business issues for you. So I spent a fair amount of time looking at particularly order-to-cash systems and working with order-to-cash systems at VMware, and we had the opportunity to implement a lot of cloud-based systems, which took some of this complexity off of our plate and gave it to others that helped do it for us. And so we implemented a large cloud-based CRM system with Salesforce. We used ADP's Global View just to give us a broader look at our global resources and our global workforce. And finally, in 2010, we actually didn't have an HR system, and there was this company that I hadn't heard about before, Workday, and we were looking at the traditional on-prem applications, and decided that, look, we think that cloud computing, look, we're enabling cloud computing in many ways at VMware. We think cloud computing is really ready for those key enterprise applications that have the core data entry record, and so we decided to go with Workday's HCM product. The thing that was, and this is after I'd had 20 years of experience of being involved in applications, and the thing that was unique about it is that I had this preconceived notion that you just turn over the keys and they would run things, and then I got educated that no, in fact, this is also an implementation. There is work. Cloud computing isn't, and particularly in those deployment stages, isn't the silver bullet. There is work to be done and planning to be done, just like any other enterprise application. The thing that was unique once we went through it is that we found that it was actually on plan, on budget, a straightforward implementation, and as we did the standard updates, they were simple, and we didn't have to worry any longer about our network or servers, etc. I then had the opportunity to meet the founders of Workday. Company was, we were founded in 2005. I actually joined the board, and my initial task as a board member was to help find a CFO to take the company public. I failed in doing that, and about 6 months later, I raised my hand and made the decision to come to Workday and to, in many ways, be back to my original roots, in which I am, am now actually sell a product that I understand better than I understood virtualization or how do you do sort of e-commerce. And so I'm just happy to be back at work. Happy to be back in an area in which the products are products that we all use every day.
Well, let's talk about that for a moment. I mean, your background in particular, you've worked as a financial leader at a number of companies whose business was heavy tech. I mean, VMware, of course, and even Amazon. And then you owned finance technology and even desktop tech through some of your IT ownership in some of those roles as well. Do finance leaders today have to get a PhD in technology? How do you climb that curve, and how do you leverage that in your role, in your roles in finance and accounting?
I think that the biggest shift that's occurred for finance leaders, and it doesn't have to be the CFO. It's it's controllers, it's individuals in FP&A organizations, is that you do have to be tightly coupled with the IT organization and the CIO's organization. Sometimes the CIO's organization will report to the CFO. Sometimes it will be running in parallel. But in any event, there has to be a very tight coupling. And what's happened in the IT organizations, whether they wanted it to happen or not, and in fact, in most cases, they haven't wanted it to happen, is that there's been a huge shift in what I'd call the consumerization of IT. For the first time in our history, over the last 3 or 4 years, the experience that you have with IT in your home and in your personal life is actually better and more reliable than the experience you have in your business. When I was at Amazon in the early 2000s, we used to joke that, and in fact it was the true pattern, is that people would come to work to shop because the reliability of the internet was so strong, and that they were at their desktop and we could see sales spike over the lunch hours, particularly during the holiday period. But today, with the ubiquity of wireless computing, with the advances in mobile devices, if you think of iPads, iPhones, Android phones, Windows phones, etc., is that your experience as a consumer is actually better than your experience in the workplace. And we're all, for the most part, people are the most important assets in most businesses. And the generation of workers coming in now just demand to have that kind of experience inside the organization. And so what's happening is that IT shops, they initially tried to lock things down and make sure that here's the device, you're still going to only get this particular Wintel laptop, and that's all you're going to have. And people voted with their feet, and they went to companies that were more nimble and modern, and could show that they were modern by opening up the experience. As a finance professional, it's just happening. I know when I was at VMware, we actually had 17 different SaaS applications running, and if you ask the CEO, he never authorized or approved any of them. They just began to happen, and the advent of and so it's something we all have to pay attention to. My guess is that everybody on the call, if you're working for a company of any size, you have individuals in your development organizations or in your IT organizations that have opened up essentially virtual machines at Amazon Web Services or outside, just because they could do it in 10 minutes and not have to put in a procurement with a credit card, and not have to do it through a deployment process inside of an IT shop that might take 3 months. And so it's happening whether we like it or not.
With regards to your comment earlier about about the user experience being better at home than it is in the enterprise, there's certainly a lot of emphasis these days, especially in cloud-based applications, for user configuration. So no longer do you have to request a new report from IT and it takes them 2 to 3 months to crank it out. You have to actually figure out the tool enough to build it, troubleshoot it, but you can have that report in 10 minutes. So this to me seems revolutionary. I'm curious as to how you guys are leveraging that at Workday, and how you're seeing sort of the power shift from IT into the user's hand.
Yeah, it's a great point and a great analogy, because it has been, I think, one of the frustrating things that we've in business have just all accepted, is that reports have to be static, and to change a report requires some planning and then some magic process that occurs somewhere in the IT organization. And the ability to do report writing, and I'll give a lot of credit, frankly, to Excel. And I think that probably everyone on the phone has, if you ask them what their true most important planning exercise and process is that it's likely they use Excel as a platform for collecting and keeping a lot of data. The problem with it is that trying to keep sort of durable long-term records and consistency of approach is a bit challenging with Excel. And so the modern tools really have moved to how do you do more flexible report writing, how do you have access to data that is in a format that is easily accessible and that is reliable. And so, I think that there's a lot of strides that are going to be made in report writing in the coming years, and it'll be one of the big changes and shifts that we all see in the profession.
Great. And actually related to that is this slide, which I'd like you to comment on. There have been any number of studies out there, this one is from the Gartner Group, showing that the vast majority of IT budget is spent on, quote unquote, keeping the lights on, and relatively little spent on doing the real work that we all want to do. This is probably something that you've seen and lived with, and you're seeing this pyramid invert. How's that process going, and what's driving that?
Well, yeah, and it's a great point. And if you think about it from the customer's perspective, whether those are internal customers to a business or your external customers, they don't care what generation of Intel architecture you're running. They don't care if you're using network attached storage. They don't care what middleware you're running or what version of an Oracle database that you're running on. It's not important to them. It is plumbing and infrastructure. And so technologies like virtualization, like advances that have been made in networking and in storage are really enabling also cloud computing. And so they're taking a lot of the complexity out of how these apps actually run and the magic of how an application can actually run off the table of things that IT organizations have to spend a lot of time worrying about the mechanics of applications. And so it's really just been a shift in some major technologies and also in great improvements in bandwidth and how you can move data back and forth as quickly as possible. It's providing access and agility to services and being able, I think most importantly, to redeploy the current workers and assets and budgets that companies have that have been focused on server upgrades or Ethernet switches or whatever the big cost will be, and shifting that outside so that you at least have some predictability and reliability as to what your future costs are going to be, and you can shift your resources to applications which are more customer focused. And and frankly, I think that one of the bright spots for SaaS providers is that as companies get more and more comfortable with devoting internal resources to applications, what kinds of applications you build will be more focused on what differentiates my business. Your HR system or your financial system doesn't differentiate you from your competitors. It certainly is important for your internal workforce and for the information that you have, but it isn't the trading system, or it isn't how you do e-commerce. And so to the extent that you can take those applications off your plate as well and focus your IT resources on applications that make real differences in the productivity and the profitability of your business, the better off your business will be and the more of a competitive advantage it will have.
Great. And next, I want to show another slide here. This is about the growth of SaaS, software as a service, as opposed to the other as-a-service platforms out there. Where do you see the market going with regards to cloud technology, and specifically with regards to how finance organizations will be continuing to leverage new technology?
Yeah, I think that SaaS is, the initial concerns that many people have had about SaaS, is the information secure? We're seeing that become less and less of a concern for customers and for potential customers, because to a large extent the SaaS providers have answered those questions. And if you think back to even to services like ADP, to services like Salesforce, the kinds of information that you're providing and that you're actually taking outside of your own organization, that's very valuable data, even compared to a general ledger. In fact, I would argue that your sales lead information and your HR information in many ways is more valuable than the information that's in a general ledger, from the perspective of concerns around security. So I think security has become less and less of a concern because, again, you've given this task to people who are building their businesses around security, and where security is really critical and important. The financial applications moving to the cloud is just the next natural component of the evolution. These systems are a bit more complicated. If you look at Workday's business, for example, we are now a newly public company, but we have a little over 350 customers today. We can handle any customer that is, for HCM, companies the size of Hewlett-Packard. From a financials perspective, there's a level of complexity in which the applications vendors have to continue to develop and to grow and to do some things around scale and to do some things around deployment of the unique applications that have been developed inside companies. But it's really just a matter of time. And I think that's where a lot of the focus, certainly the focus at Workday, where we sort of started from scratch, has been that half of our resources in the engineering organization today are focused on financials, even though that represents a single-digit percentage of our overall bookings. And so I think it's a matter of time. I think just like the move occurred from mainframe to client server, there will be a move from on-premise for your core applications to the cloud. And as this chart shows, it's we're just beginning to hit that tipping point of when that will occur.
Right. Gotcha. At this point, why don't we go ahead and move on? I already launched the third polling question, and I'm just being mindful of time here. Let's get into some of our user questions very quickly. So we have the user attendee questions, so that we can hit a couple of those and then get everyone out of here on time. So Mark, thank you so much. That was great insights, and speaking to someone who's been a financial leader at two of the largest technology companies on earth, it's just great to get that perspective. So thank you so much. An attendee question actually is going to go right back to Mark. And that question was that, Mark, you mentioned earlier sort of proliferation of cloud apps in the enterprise, with potentially a lot of people who used to know where all the bodies were buried not having a clue. So, IT organizations not knowing that certain people are firing things up, or the CEO or finance not knowing that IT is firing certain things up. It's so easy to adopt many of these cloud apps. How do you manage that when a big part of the job of corporate finance is risk management?
Well, it's a great question, and I think it largely has to come from the fact that somewhere along the line, all cloud applications and all these vendors want to get paid, and so it's the way that we have tackled the problem. In organizations in which I've worked, is to actually embed really strong financial people inside the organizations, inside IT, inside sales organizations, inside operations organizations, and just make sure that they're really part of the team. And so it's not so much, I think, about control as it is about developing a good business partner system inside your finance organizations. From a central controller, from a central headquarters perspective, it's diversifying your resources a bit, but that way you can at least learn and know what's happening, and then just to create awareness around the issues.
Okay, great, thanks. Next question, also to Mark, is how are you seeing the relation between finance and IT change?
I think it's...
And actually, how can you keep that a positive relationship?
a lot of the positive relationship is going to just be around personalities. I think that the thing that's really important for finance professionals to understand is that for the IT organizations, this can be a very positive shift, but it's a very big culture shift. IT organizations have historically had a lot of control. As we move from even in the mainframe environments to client server, there was a lot of change that occurred, but it was largely IT organizations had control, and they had essentially the keys. And what's happened with the consumerization is that there's a lot of change occurring in IT orgs, and so it's simply, I think, being aware that the IT organizations need to change, and they need to be able to manage the change, and that the jobs that exist today in an IT organization aren't necessarily the jobs or the roles that you'll have moving forward. And so it's just looking at how do you do the change management. And finance has traditionally been an important aspect of change management in companies, and so you have the ability to really help the IT org manage through this change.
Got it. Great. Thank you very much. And on that note, we have a few housekeeping items to attend to, and we want to make sure we get everyone out on time. So thanks to, first off, both Mark and Laurie, fantastic information and insights today. We really appreciate your time, and thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
A couple quick items. You will be prompted once again, short survey. If you would like to be connected with Workday or either of the speakers, we make that very easy, click of a mouse, so stick around for that. Plus, we greatly appreciate your feedback. If you have any questions about CPE credit, please do contact Chris Brower, and you can see her email address right there. A quick note, Proformative has a finance, accounting, and treasury technology conference coming up March 20th. It's free CPE, all the usual stuff, amazing speakers, so I'll just give a quick shout out to that. Finally, thanks to Workday for sponsoring this event. It's incredibly rare that we get the kind of insights that we got this morning from such an articulate and experienced finance leader. And also thanks to Laurie for bringing the wonderful information through the survey that Workday executed with CFO Research. It's just great information brought to you by Workday. We really appreciate their support. And with that, I will say thanks to all of the attendees who joined us today. We know how busy you are, so we appreciate your spending this hour with us. We look forward to seeing you again at another Proformative event or online at Proformative.com. And as soon as I shut down this portion of the webinar, you will be directed to the brief survey. Thanks so much, folks. We hope to see you again soon. Cheers.